We can proceed with the next session. And Shraddha, would you like to introduce? Meanwhile, I'll just share the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, so moving on to our next session. So we have a panel discussion on the topic Internet for All, Strengthening Literacy, Inclusion and Diversity. So we have Mr. Udbhav Tiwari. He is the Public Policy Advisor at Mozilla. He will be moderating this session. And we have the panelist, Mr. Samiran Gupta. He is the head of ICANN. Ms. Anju Mangal, head of Asia and Pacific at WW Foundation. And Mr. Prabharan Purnachandran. He is the Director, Center for Internet Studies and Artificial Intelligence. We can start with the session. Udbhav, over to you.
Unfortunately, Dr. Prabha will not be joining the panel today. Just wanted to inform all you people. Thank you very much. Udbhav.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to confirm if Anu joined us yet. Hi, Samiran. I can see you.
Anju is joining, yes.
Okay, great. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Good. It's nice to see you.
You as well. Great. So I think we have everyone from the panel because we've been informed that one of the participants may not be able to make it. So without much ado, I think I'd like to start off, if that's okay with the organizers, or do we have to wait for either other people to join or for any other sort of logistical stuff?
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So hi, everyone, and welcome to the panel Internet for All, Strengthening Literacy, Inclusion and Diversity as a part of the Youth Internet Governance Forum India 2021. I'm Udbhav Tiwari, a public policy advisor for the Mozilla Corporation based in New Delhi in India, and I'll be moderating the panel today. Among us in the panel, we have some very esteemed experts from the space of internet governance and some key stakeholders who've played a very important role in the growth and the development of the internet, as we know it, not just in India, but also in the Asia-Pacific region. First, we have Mr. Samiran Gupta, who's the head of India at ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Named and Numbers. And we also have Anju Mangal, who's the head of Asia-Pacific at the World Wide Web Foundation. And the both of us, along with me, will be talking in general about what are the different ways in which one can strengthen the internet to make sure that it plays a role in literacy, inclusion, and diversity. In order to kick things off, I'd like to invite Mr. Samiran to first, of course, please introduce yourself but also to give your opening remarks on the topic. Over to you, Samiran.
Thank you, Udbhav, and great to be here. And again, before I get started, let me share my appreciation to the organizers of this Youth IGF. I can see that I've been following the chat on WhatsApp, and there's been a lot of activity in the morning and great participation. Wonderful to see everybody out here today. So as a matter of introduction, let me just say that ICANN is responsible for coordinating the names and numbers of related to internet addresses, and ICANN sort of allocates IP addresses to the regional internet registries, and then these the registries then allocate addresses to the ISPs, and who then give it to individual users. policy making at ICANN is led by the community, and ICANN organization or ICANN org supports the community in doing this. I just wanted to put this out up front so that as we talk more, it'll just make a little more sense about when you talk about, access for all. And today, of course, the specific area is strengthening literacy, inclusion, and diversity. What I'm going to focus on today is what is it that ICANN is doing to make sure that access for all is more meaningful, and so let me just stop here now, and I'll get back more into this topic when we discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samiran. Anju, over to you.
Thank you. Namaste to all my friends and colleagues in India and parts of the world. Thank you so much to the amazing organizers for inviting me to join today's panel session. I hope everyone's well despite the challenges you face, and I hope the amazing youths are excited to learn more about internet governance. You are an important part of them, and without you, we will never reach the 4.4 billion that are still not connected. I'll just quickly say that I work for the World Wide Web Foundation, and we advocate for an open, secure, and safe internet and web for all. And we also believe that the lack of access or connectivity can impact literacy development, exclude vulnerable and marginalized groups. So that's one of the things that I'm working on in terms of access and connectivity. Today we're going to be focusing a bit broader about what we are doing. But I just wanted to say, and I wanted to acknowledge the amazing India diaspora, because we have Indian-born leaders dominating top technology ranks like Twitter's Parag Agrawal, Google Sundar Pichai.
Udbhav, I think when Anju does join, we can ask her to
Continue again.
turn off the camera, if that can help with the bandwidth.
Absolutely. I'll do that. Sure. So while Anju sort of joins us back, I thought that would also introduce Mozilla, the corporation, and the foundation, and also talk a little bit about the work and some of the work that we've done and are doing in relation to this broader theme. So the Mozilla Foundation is an organization that many of us will arguably be familiar with for the Firefox browser, which has now been around for almost 2 decades, but is also a pretty unique organization in that it operates as a technology company, which is the Mozilla Corporation, but is fundamentally owned by the Mozilla Foundation. And being a nonprofit tech company, really lets Mozilla focus on many issues that some larger tech companies sometimes choose to not engage in, or engage in with a very different viewpoint and perspective. And keeping this sort of broader theme of diversity, inclusion, and most importantly, literacy in mind, one of the key sort of projects is just a very small example within Mozilla that comes to mind is the Common Voice project. So the Common Voice project that is run within the Mozilla Foundation currently is actually the largest data set of publicly available voice data in the world, under a Creative Commons Zero license, which means that anyone can download and use it to train their machine learning models, so that the availability of technology that allows individuals to be able to, and developers more importantly, to incorporate voice interfaces into their either websites or apps, which we believe is key in order to be able to onboard the remaining 3 to 4 billion individuals that Anju had mentioned that aren't really on the internet, in a manner that isn't necessarily restricted to the silos of large technology companies. And there are many Indian languages that are a part of the Common Voice data set as well. And the foundation works very closely with organizations around the world, including community organizations, in order to increase the size of its corpus. And keeping that just as an example, I can see that Anju has joined us back. So Anju, would you like to sort of wrap up your introduction, if you'd like to do so?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure where I left off or where I disconnected. I wanted to just say it's amazing to see top technology ranks being led by Indian-born leaders. Yeah, so you could become the next CEO, and there's also diversity in these amazing tech companies, which makes a huge difference. So I'm going to just leave it at that, and I'm going to add it on the chat what we basically do. Thanks.
And so I think like with those sort of initial round of introductions, it'll be pretty great if we can actually get into the sort of substantive part of the conversation. Samiran, would you like to come in essentially about what ICANN's sort of plans are between for getting like what Anju mentioned, the sort of like the next billion users who need to come online in the coming years, and if you could explain to us a little bit about what those plans are and what impact I can expect them to have.
Thank you, Udbhav, and thanks, Anju, for the perfect lead up to what I was going to talk about today. So, I was just actually looking at the International Telecom Union's recent report. It's something called the ITU Measuring Digital Development Facts and Figures 2021. It just come out last week or a few days ago. And what it mentions is, and I'm actually quoting from the report, 4.9 billion people are today using the internet. This means that roughly 63% of the world's population is now online, an increase of 17%, with almost 800 million people estimated to have come online in 2019. Okay, so internet penetration has just started accelerating across the globe, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of brought that on a little bit, but still there are 2.9 billion people who are offline. Okay, now if you look at this data in one side, and then on the other side, if you look at another number I'm going to put out there, that 1.35 billion people in the world speak English. Okay, so you have 4.9 billion people using the internet, but only 1.35 people speak English. So really, the internet how do we make the internet more meaningful for the rest of the population that does not speak English? And this is something which is part of ICANN's strategic plan, which runs from 2021 to 2025. So one of the strategic objectives that ICANN has is to evolve the unique identifier system, so which is the names and numbers part, in coordination and collaboration with the relevant parties to continue to serve the needs of the global internet user base. Okay, so how does that happen? How does that actually work? So the strategic goal that we have related to this is to foster competition, consumer choice, and innovation in the internet space by increasing awareness and encouraging readiness for universal acceptance, internationalized domain names implementation, and the use of IPv6. Okay, so this is now very specific. So, I'm just drilling down to more specific, points of action. Now, let me talk very briefly about internationalized domain names and universal acceptance. So I'll just introduce both these topics, and we can talk more when I come back later. So the work on internationalized domain names, or IDN, started in 2009. And since then, 18 scripts, including 9 index scripts, are now available in the root zone of the internet. And I know that this morning you all had a session on, how the internet actually works, like, how the root zone possibly, I would imagine this has already been covered this morning, that how when you do a search, it actually goes to a root zone or one of the servers of the root zone. And then the top level or the right of the dot actually helps the search find its way to the content to the left of the dot. Okay, so I won't go into that, but the fact is, if people cannot speak English and most of the internet services are in English, then a lot of people are not able to use the internet properly, and therefore the internationalized domain names actually help in having this top level or the unique identifiers in local scripts. Okay, so however, when we started doing that a few years down the road, we discovered that there is another problem that that started appearing, and that problem is classified as the problem of universal acceptance. Very simply put, universal acceptance simply means that all domain names and all email addresses need to work on all applications. Okay, so so it could also so what that also covers is a situation where, for example, you have a domain name such as let's say .accountant. Okay, now the right of the dot has so many letters in accountant, whereas most servers are kind of programmed to accept maybe 3 or sometimes 4 right of the dot. So that is a universal acceptance problem. Equally, out of India, you have the .bharat top-level domain, and as more and more people start using it, there could be some servers where those do not appear. So let me just stop here. Then we can talk more about what's happening in these two spaces.
Thanks, Samiran. That was a very, I think, enlightening overview in general of both the role that ICANN plays in the ecosystem, but also more specifically, what are some of the efforts that ICANN is making in order to make sure that the web is truly more inclusive and diverse. Anju, would you like to come in now and in general just talk about, both from your experience at the World Wide Web Foundation, but also generally in this space, what according to you is really the role that you see between access and connectivity and the actual themes of this panel, which are like literacy, diversity, and inclusion? And please feel free to use this opportunity if there are particular initiatives of the World Wide Web Foundation that would be useful for the participants to hear about as well, and to sort of like just give us a brief overview of that too. So over to you.
Sure, thank you so much. Am I audible? So can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, so before I start, if any of you are not sure of the words or acronyms, just use the chat forum and ask any questions. And you can also tell me if you're using a smartphone or a laptop right now, and what data plan are you on, and do you have access and connectivity issues? Chat forum. So years ago, people did not prioritize online access and connectivity before COVID, but now you see lots of organizations prioritizing it. Everything from healthcare to education and social connection have had to change online in response to COVID-19. And this pandemic has posed lots of challenges for people who have very little or no access to the internet or web. And as Samiran mentioned, there is a need to keep digital skills and literacy simple and in local language. It helps to talk about digital literacy and skills and explaining to people in very simple language. For example, making people understand how to use your search engine on your web browser, or understanding your privacy and security settings when using an application, being able to use PowerPoint, Word, or even database or an editing software. We want to ensure they have practical skills in local language to use technology to access and manage information online.
I'm sorry, I think like Anju dropped off. We'll definitely like let her complete her thoughts when she comes back on. I thought that I could also take a little bit of an opportunity from Mozilla side to talk a little bit about Firefox and some of those components and what we do in general and the approach we tend to follow when it comes to. Hi Anju, great, sorry, you're back. I'll just actually let you finish and then start off what I was saying. Please go ahead.
I'm really sorry. I think I have the worst connectivity issues. It's because I'm actually in a very remote place. That's why I'm having these connectivity issues. I just wanted to say, you know, there's so many new apps coming up. I don't know how people keep up with it. I still don't know how to use TikTok or Instagram properly. And I think I need digital literacy skills from you youths. We recently did an investment report to understand what it would take to connect humanity by 2030. And we need around $428 billion to connect humanity. South Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific need a lot of the investment. And much of the digital divide has been on digital access and connectivity and infrastructure. And often the solution to digital divide is centered on providing more access through increased digital infrastructure and access to devices. And this is why I asked you to add on your chat form, are you using smartphones? And then focusing on digital literacy and skills. So beyond infrastructure, we need to figure out how to connect people already covered by, say, broadband network or satellite initiatives. These also include, you know, increase and support to device affordability of data and services, and then we can focus on digital skills and program. And when we look at device affordability, so having access to cheap smartphones is key, but also making sure that it's affordable. And we need digital literacy and content to connect the next billion people, next 4.9 billion people. And when we look at connectivity, we also want to make sure that it's meaningful. So what do we understand by meaningful? It means that everyone, including persons with disabilities, youths, women and girls, people living in rural and remote communities should have access and connectivity. Right now, I am speaking from a remote island. There's also connectivity issues as you have already experienced. So when we talk about meaningful connectivity, it should imply having access to an appropriate device. So you should ask your government, you should ask your people, do you have access to appropriate and very cheap device? Do you have enough data and speeds? Do you even use the internet every day, even during a pandemic or a natural disaster? I want to talk about what we can do or what we've been doing as, you know, with governments. But did you want me to talk about it now, or do you want me to talk about it later? What do you want?
We'll be happy to, I think, get into some of the that a little later. I think like maybe just as the immediate next question, if that's okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so, I mean, I think like very, very briefly, even on the Mozilla side, whether it's the localization of the Firefox web browser, which thanks to the very large community that Mozilla has, is in many ways the most widely translated sort of browser that is available in the ecosystem when it comes to the support of underserved languages, specifically because it's very easy for the community to be able to actually come together and create translations for the browser in an easy to adopt manner that then can sometimes very rapidly actually make it out into the final browser itself. And the platform that we use for that is actually one that we developed internally called Pontoon, the link to which I've just shared internally, that just shows like essentially pretty much a tool that we've created that allows individuals to be able to pick different aspects of Firefox, create small communities around them, and then allow individuals to collaborate together on translations and making sure that even the sort of interface via which one accesses the internet, which in many ways is the web browser, both on mobile phones as well as on laptops and on desktops, is actually arguably the first step to making sure that individuals can actually begin to understand to use the internet well. There are also many other aspects of it. Samiran is definitely going to talk a little more about ICANN's efforts in making domain names themselves universal. There have also been a fair bit of work that's gone in the background within the entire browser community. So by no means just Firefox, but other browsers such as Edge, Chrome, Safari as well. Regarding the support of these international domain names and making sure that it's not just, say, the top 50 or the top 100, like most common languages around the world that really get the support, but that it should actually be possible via organizations such as the International Standards Organization and other entities that actually set these sort of language standards for that guidance to be available for as many languages as reasonably possible, regardless of whether they are at that immediate moment sort of an active market or capable or have enough internet deployment in their localities at that point in time or not. So that was just a short overview about Firefox and what we do on our end from the sort of localization of languages side. So Samiran, would you like to come in a little right now and maybe expand on the two initiatives that you'd mentioned at the end of your previous question?
Sure. So let me pick up from where I left off on internationalized domain name. So the work at ICANN, again, with the ICANN community started in 2009. For internationalized domain names. And but let me, since we are in India mostly, let me talk about what happened in India between 2015 and 2020. So a panel of community experts from mostly all from India, but some also from Bangladesh, Nepal, Singapore, and Sri Lanka joined in something called the New Brahmi Generation Panel. So these were linguists, IT experts, anyone who's worked on language computing. And what they worked on is actually the rule sets for, the alphabets in different languages. So 9 scripts were part of this, endeavor. So these scripts were Bengali or Bangla, Devanagari, Gujarati, Gurmukhi, Kannada, Malayalam, Oriya, Tamil, Telugu. Okay, so these 9 scripts actually catered to multiple languages. I mean, there could be an argument whether it's 30 or 300, but the point is many languages are served by these 9 scripts. Okay, and what the community has helped us to do is to actually clean up the rule books on, I'm keeping this very simple and I'm talking in lay terms, but the rules require to have these scripts in the root zone of the internet. So therefore, when, if you know how the internet works, and when there's a top level domain, which let us say ends with .bharat or .siksha or whatever it might be, the systems, at least broadly, the systems are available to be able to access that domain name. Okay. Now, the challenge that comes after this is, wait a minute, and does every search engine know how to search on a .bharat? Or is a second level domain name, are the rules properly made? Because, for example, your name Udbhav could arguably be spelled in 2 different ways. Okay, so which is the correct way of spelling Udbhav? Now, and then when, let us say, a registrar is actually, selling the name Udbhav for a user to use, what are the rules that the registrar ought to follow at the second level? So when you buy Udbhav spelled in a certain manner, does that mean that all other variants of Udbhav are blocked or not? Okay, so these are the kinds of stuff that we got into. But eventually, and it goes to what you were talking about, Udbhav, about voice. Okay, eventually, many companies in India, as you might be aware, are looking at voice to kind of leapfrog over some of these challenges, and therefore take you closer to the content. Before I move further, let me just add that over the last year, particularly during the pandemic, we've been noticing new applications which are now in the Indian market, which a lot of the TikTok replacements, let's put it that way, those apps, Many of them are very welcoming of local scripts. You can be online using local scripts. Okay, so there is a move towards this, and from ICANN's perspective, we're just trying to make sure that the technology is there to support all of this, so that eventually people can get to the content they need. Because if the access to the content is not there, what typically happens is the market can't reach it, and therefore there is no content available. So it's a vicious cycle that needs to be broken. Let me stop here now.
Thank you, Samiran. And I think that that's very true with regard to especially the growth that we have seen in India in Indic languages and Indic language content that's been available over the last decade is actually because of the concentrated efforts, such as both the ones that you mentioned by ICANN, but also by the industry to fix some of those technical barriers that allows the community to generate a lot of that content organically rather than by dedicated efforts. And in fact, is in many ways trying to replicate the growth of the internet in other sort of languages, such as English as well, by making sure the technology exists and then the language and then the content sort of like comes anyway. Anju, do you want to like very quickly come in and complete the point that you were making about how the World Wide Web Foundation works with governments in general and generally on access and connectivity?
Thanks. I see that lots of people are typing on the chat forum. It's nice to see that some of you are connected, and it's nice to see that you have a good data plan. But imagine the people that don't, imagine the children that don't, especially during this pandemic. So I just wanted you to all think about that when I talk about what we are doing with governments and organizations. So we continue to encourage adoption of affordability and meaningful connectivity targets, as I mentioned earlier. So what we do is we work with governments to drive down prices and increase access, particularly for communities that don't have access. So we work in a multi-stakeholder process. So we work with national coalitions like government, civil societies, private and public sector, and other stakeholders to develop policies. We work on research, and then we take that research, because it has to be evidence-based, and then we take it to the policymakers, and then we look at how to improve affordability. And it's also important to ensure that when we talk about access and connectivity, it should be all-inclusive approach. So looking at improving collection of gender and poverty disaggregated data to track progress. And we also advocate for expanded public access initiatives and projects that benefit the community. So for example, if there is a community network initiative, what we do is we support them through policies. We also support them through grants and funding, etc. We also encourage governments to focus on digital literacy, as this is a very important topic that we are talking about. There's been ongoing initiatives done by my organization, particularly Alliance for the Affordable Internet. ICANN has also mentioned, Samiran has also mentioned, Udbhav has also mentioned about what Mozilla does, but there's also other organizations, International Telecommunication Union, Asia Pacific ICT Training Center, Internet Society, APNIC, UNESCO, and other key organizations that focus on digital skills training, particularly for youth. We also have some amazing organizations in India that we work with on access and connectivity, like Digital Empowerment Foundation. I'll just give you as one example. And next week, the International Telecommunication Union and the Web Foundation and the Alliance for Affordable Internet will be working with UNICEF to organize an event as part of the digital transformation program focusing on Hour of Code. So we will be looking at coding skills and online safety and child online protection. So we'll be teaching like simple things like making sure you have strong passwords, encouraging you to do coding so that you can create an application online, or understanding how you can protect yourself online. I will add the links on the chat forum so you can also join if you want. This is specifically for youths between the age of 15 or 14, if I'm correct. If I'm not correct, sorry. Between 14 to I think 30. So yeah, you're welcome to join. I also wanted to talk about, internet shutdowns, but we can come back to that, Udbhav, if that's okay. I think it's very important that we mention that, because if we have internet shutdowns, then we don't have digital literacy. So I think if we can talk about that, that would be great. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anju. I think that's a very valid point, and we'll definitely sort of circle back to it as well. Samiran, is there in general anything that you want to add either to your previous point, because I know that you mentioned you wanted to cover two ones and you've covered one, or any reactions that you have to what Anju's told us so far?
So, I could be talking all day, but I also see a hand up. So maybe you can take one question, and then I will continue with universal acceptance.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for pointing that out. Hi, Devan. If I'm pronouncing that right, would you mind asking your question?
Yes. So you mentioned about local apps propping up, and they are giving a boost to the languages which were not earlier being noticed. But then again, as you said, TikTok parallels or TikTok proxies for India. But then again, doesn't it have a caveat also? If we start doing this to multiple apps, for example, when India was thinking about banning apps and app came up. So don't you think it will sort of isolate India and it will silo the thought process of Indians for example, for social trends? And don't you think there will be some drawbacks because of that?
I think, Devin, that question is for me. So there are many things in your question which are kind of interrelated. I'm speaking purely from a technical perspective, and I will answer your question, but let me just clarify my perspective. I'm speaking purely from a technical perspective, to make sure that the internet is available to all users. So users who speak different languages, who have different devices. Anju's already spoken about, for example, the cost of access being as low as possible, so on and so forth. Now, one of the challenges that we've seen during COVID is the shutdown of schools, and the fact that much of primary, secondary, as well as university education, most of it has gone online. And even in a country like India, where you might think that in the big cities everybody is connected and therefore they're being able to get that content, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in a tier 2 city or those who go to a small municipality school have the devices to get there. But the question then becomes, if you were in a class where, let us say, just as an example, the medium of education, the first language is Gujarati, and maybe you start learning English from a later stage. The fact is, if that content is now not available online, then you're dropping out of school, okay, effectively, okay? So that, and there are many studies, and I'm not an expert on this, I'm not going to talk much on this, but the fact is there are already many studies showing that the damage of not being able to attend school when you were normally should have been going to school, for those who are in a certain age category, because they don't have the devices and therefore they're now excluded from going to school. So this was the context in which I was talking about making the internet accessible in different languages. To your question about whether having applications in different languages kind of make us isolate us. I'll just leave one thought with you, and this is empirical, the data I'm sharing, but I believe I've read it somewhere, some point in the last 5 to 10 years. I think of all literature that comes out in the world, a large percentage that is made in English comes out of India. So my point very simply is that India is a very complex country. We have 22 official languages. by the year 2035, many of you who would be, midway through your career at that time, there'll be at least 30, if not 35 official languages. In this, if you take that, this complexity as a baseline, the fact that we have 22 official languages, even today, should a person who only speaks Bangla, for example, should that person be able to connect with somebody who only speaks Tamil? And how does that person do it? Okay, so to that extent, technology needs to, come forward, or technologists need to come forward. Companies need to build applications to solve that problem. Whether we speak other languages or not, all of us in India anyway multilingual, but the fact is whether we speak other languages or not is a separate thing. So at least we should be able to speak our own languages and use them online as easily as possible. So let me again stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Nathan. I think that, given the fact that I think we have about between 10 to maybe 12 minutes left on this panel as a whole, we can definitely also do a round of Q&A. So I invite participants both in case they want to sort of raise their hands and ask the questions verbally, or if they prefer asking the questions or any doubts or just queries in general that they may have over chat, we'll be happy to sort of take them in order as they come in as well. And while we do that and folks can consider what they want to ask, Anju, do you want to very quickly come in and make the point that you mentioned you'd like to talk on the shutdown?
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I like the points that were raised by Samiran. Learning is imperative, and our classrooms or Zoom classes should also be for youth, children from all different cultures, because we want to embrace diversity. And when we talk about digital literacy, it's not just being able to understand and use technology, but being able to teach someone who has no clue about how to use technologies. And this was more apparent during the pandemic. I'm from Fiji, and my mom's family is from Punjab. I just wanted to mention that because I'm Indian as well. But I wanted to mention about the small island states, because many of the teachers struggled during the pandemic. They were advised to go on Google Classroom or use Zoom to connect with their students. But it was very difficult for some of these teachers to embrace these new technologies. So what started happening was that a lot of these young, children were very tech savvy, and they started teaching their teachers how to use these technologies. And I think it completely changed the dynamics. And so, what Samiran has mentioned, I just wanted to say is that when you're looking at connectivity and access and digital literacy, you have to think about your target audience, right? You have to think about who you need to provide these access to. And the other thing is, lots of people have disabilities. They have autism. There are children and students with autism, dyslexia. How do you make it meaningful for them? So when you're thinking about connectivity and access, think about them, because like I said earlier, you might become a CEO for a very prominent organization. You will need to start thinking about everyone. So in terms of internet shutdown, Shraddhanjali mentioned restricted internet access and talked about content moderation. And I think most of you have already mentioned. If you're not familiar with internet shutdown, it means internet or web blackouts or killing switch to stop people from accessing information or blocking access to certain applications like TikTok in India. In many countries, some of the things that we have come across is that some countries don't have access to Facebook, Twitter, or WhatsApp. We are against internet shutdowns and would like to encourage the government or our industries and telcos to continue providing access to the internet and web, because internet access has become a human right. And shutting down the internet has huge effect on national and global economy, because many people are now using the internet for online businesses. So imagine if you shut down mobile ads and social networking sites, or cloud storage. This could mean that people may not be able to have access to electronic payments or even e-government services that the government continues to promote. So this also means that there could be significant loss to telecommunication. And when we do this, the whole notion of internet for all is under threat. I'm just going to leave it at that. And if anyone has questions or comments, please feel free to raise it.
So much, Anju. Completely agree with everything that you've said as well. Samiran, we have, I think, two questions that you may be able to help with. The first is, will the new applications be as inclusive as the earlier ones? Could you please elaborate on that? And the second, to the extent that you'd like to cover it, is that what are the security measures that ICANN takes in consideration with the process of allocation of IPs? And is there any way that as a student I can contribute to security operations at ICANN?
All right, so both interesting questions, but I think the first question, Pranay, when you say that will the new applications be as inclusive as the earlier one, is fairly generic. So the issue is that ICANN is not making the applications. ICANN is just making sure that the certain set of technologies are standardized somewhere else, but are adopted by the community and are being used. Okay, so whether they're inclusive or not is a different issue. But I would imagine if you look at a country like India, if you say that 800 million internet users, about 500 million, I'm giving very gross figures, these are not precise. Let us say 500 million do not use English as a language. There's a market over there. Now you build application, and obviously there'll be some challenges in getting those applications out. Now, whether you make them quote unquote inclusive or not also depends on I mean, at the end of the day, if it's a competitive market, by definition it needs to be inclusive, otherwise you will not make enough money and you will shut down. So I'm not sure exactly what you meant by that question. If you have a follow-up clarification, Pranay, I'll be very happy to take that. Now, Nitya Ananja is asking, what are these security measures that ICANN takes in consideration in the process of allocation of IPs? That's a very good question. Broadly, there is a standard procedure that is in place in allocation of IP numbers, and these procedures were created not by or these standards were created not by ICANN, but eventually much earlier. These standards were created by the IETF. So we have to follow that process of allocation of internet protocol numbers. And when you talk about cybersecurity and how you can contribute to the security operations of ICANN, so ICANN's focus on cybersecurity is limited to broadly the root server system, okay, or the root zone more specifically. And there are two community groups that work in this area. First is the Root Server Systems Advisory Committee, and the second is the Security and Stability Advisory Committee, which is, so one looks at the stability part, and the other looks specifically at security and stability, security issues. And both these community groups, you can go online, take a look, and see what's going on, join mailing lists. But SSAC is almost a membership of experts, and there is a sort of an interview process to be included in the SSAC. It's quite rigorous. The RSAC, or the Root Server System Advisory Committee, is actually comprised of the root server operators, so the 12 plus 1, 13, the 12 companies that operate the 13 root servers, plus the community who works in this space. So there are members from India such as Anupam Agrawal, Anand Raje, Harish Chaudhary, and a couple more who are part of that community. And they actually join work parties and lead work parties. I know Anupam is leading one as we speak, on issues on security and stability. So let me again stop here, and if we get some more time, I would like to just conclude some thoughts on universal acceptance and what is happening. So I'll wait for the cue from you, Udbhav, on that.
Sure, Samiran, absolutely. We'll be sure to set aside some time for that right at the end.
Thank you.
I think that we have a hand raised from Rohan George as well. Rohan, would you like to come in and ask your question?
Hi, Udbhav. So this is more to do with how, like, I understand that there are different stakeholders, like you are part of a organization which is essentially a browser. There'll be others who are services. How are governments really interacting with you when they ask for shutdowns or when they ask for removal of posts? And like, of course, like there are a few like models like the DMCA, copyright, how they are removed. But other than that, how are generally governments interacting with you on this? And is there like a thin line, or is there something on paper that they're following? Or does it tend to be blurred, or just like a blanket request? And how do you go about with it? Like, what is your guiding principle? Do you guys follow your own company ethos, or like, of course, you have to follow the law of the land, but do you also go back to your host country's law of the land? Like, is there some process? If you could give us some guidance on.
Excellent. I think that's a good question. I mean, I'm definitely happy to speak for how it happens elsewhere in the sector. So far, at least, browsers haven't really become vectors for content moderation yet. There are some signs in different parts around the world that folks may want to change that, but governments usually tend either to directly go to service providers. So if you post, say, something on a social media platform, they would go to the platform directly, or they would tend to ask for the content or the website to be blocked by the ISP as well. But at that level, in general, I would say it tends to be fairly different depending on country to country. India has a fairly established, clear legal regime for how content takedowns need to take place. And there is a committee, there are experts, they make decisions. Those decisions are conveyed to companies. Usually there are some conversations. But overall, it's definitely a process where I think different companies, depending on both their ethos as well as the country in which they're operating, tend to follow different processes. Things in India after the new intermediate liability rules have definitely changed a little bit, but I would say it's a little early to say exactly what the on-ground impact of that has been yet. So to answer your question in short, I think it depends from country to country and from company to company, but there is a sort of clear process for that in India as well, and it's definitely not something that I think one needs to one can sort of track and follow quite clearly from transparency reports and other open obligations as well. I hope that answers your question. Just also being very cognizant of time, I think we also have a question from Pranay. Pranay, do you want to very quickly either ask your question or respond to Samiran in terms of your clarification?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for clarifying the previous question. So I have a follow-up. As I was meant to the inclusivities, last year we have seen that Indian government was banning a lot of Chinese apps. So TikTok was part of that. So, and government came up with another app, private players. So, and due to that, many users lost their reach out and other things and monetary gains, whatever they are getting from the app. So is there anything that can be done when the conflict is taking place between the countries, like they cannot stopping that this banning of applications, because that also will that also hampers the people in terms of inclusivity or reaching out people. Like we have, if we look at the country like India, we have like caste issues and other issues like economic and other issues. So can we look into that matter?
Samiran, would you like to respond to that if possible? Otherwise, and you can also use that as an opportunity to answer that. And if not, then I'm equally happy to respond to as well, or we can also ask Anju to come.
Surely. I'll speak a little bit about this without getting into too many details. But I think, Pranay, the real issue over here, what happened last year in India vis-a-vis Chinese apps, there was a specific reason. If you go take a look at, past documents, why the government of India thought that certain apps needed to be banned. Now, we can argue about that, whether those are right reasons or wrong reasons, but then the government came up with a set of reasons. As a matter of fact, some of you may or may not be aware that the Department of Telecommunications in India also has now a trusted list of equipment suppliers. Okay, and what they've done there is actually fairly progressive. That if, for example, a company X wants to bring in a piece of equipment, it could be made in, and I'm not taking country names, in Y country. Okay, the company X has to declare the standards. It's a self-declaration. Okay, so it's not like that very equipment will be physically examined and dissected and handed back to you. But no, you make a self-declaration and the government decides whether you should be allowed to use it or not. So I think, Pranay, what is happening is the world is, these are all new realities that we're dealing with. Okay, there are security risks that, perhaps all of us in the room today, and I see there are 98 of us at this time, may not be entirely aware of. Okay, and the government says that they do not want us to use certain apps, there are some reasons. Now, again, we come from a country which a very famous economist said that, we are the argumentative Indians, so we like to have a debate. So yes, there is a place for debate, but the fact is we need to also understand the government is trying to look after our best interests when they make those declarations. So your income or anybody's income versus national security, national security will win. So let me just stop here, and Udbhav can add more to it.
Oh, thanks, Samiran. I think that you answered it quite perfectly. Is there a need for sort of like cooperation between countries and for there to be greater understanding on these issues so that bans are not necessarily the only measure that's carried out? I would say certainly yes, and I think there are various fora at an international level that can allow for such conversations. But at the end of the day, I think the provision of services within a country largely in some ways remains a sovereign imperative, right? It is the outlook of a country and its sole decision-making ability. And I think that's usually what leads to sometimes external developments and legitimate concerns impacting things like the app ban. So I think it's clearly an evolving space, and we will see a fair bit happen over the coming years. I just keeping in mind that we have only I think 2 minutes left. Anju, would you like to come in both with your thoughts, but also in just generally any closing remarks or things that you'd like to say, maybe in a minute or 45 seconds if possible?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, internet shutdowns. We continue to recommend governments, companies, and also civil society to take urgent actions to bring as many people online. But when it comes to dealing with internet shutdowns and banning of apps, you need to continuously remind the people that you work with, particularly governments, that they signed the Human Rights Declaration, which says that everyone should have freedom of expression or opinion. So I think, it's always good to encourage, and so governments do not feel threatened by their own citizens. And there are many governments that are doing their best, but I think because of things like misinformation, fake news, etc., they tend to ban apps. I think it's what I really want to say is that you really need good negotiation skills. And with negotiation skills is bringing key stakeholders to the table. You bring in the government people, but also the telcos, the operators, and figuring out very simple things. If you do internet shutdowns, what does that cost you? What does it cost you, the economy? because we live in a world now, everything is digital, basically digitalized. We're looking at, internet for all, web, we need to be online. You saw what the situation was when we had the COVID. So I think it's very important to bring these important points and to explain it to the government and also the people that you work with. But I also want to encourage citizens and youths in particular, that when you're online, be smart how you highlight your issues. You can highlight as many issues you want, but the way you articulate it online is very important, because at the end of the day, while you are showing that you have freedom of opinion and expression, you also need to be thinking smart, and you are also responsible to your community. So act like someone who can be diplomatic and figure out ways to ensure that governments or even organizations understand how to deal with these things. And the other thing is, I wanted to raise this quickly before I end this. You could also talk about removing barriers like consumer facing taxes and internet shutdowns, because this is one of the key things that we're facing right now. There's social media taxation in various countries as well. And I think, it's not just about governments, but companies play a huge role. If they want to provide affordable and accessible connectivity, what does that mean? It also means that they need to apply, allowing access to apps. And then, if the government has in their policies, for example, they say, we want to connect everyone, we want to make sure that everyone has broadband access. What does that mean to underserved and unserved areas and populations? And what does that mean when it comes to, again, applications? You don't need to shut it down. You don't need to ban it, but there are ways to deal with it. At the end of the day, I just want to say is that you have the power to do so much. And I think you, as youths, you're growing to learn so many great things. I was a youth. I'm not a youth anymore, but I used to be a youth. And it's always looking for those right role models and mentors to learn from them and to understand how you, as a community, can work with governments and other organizations to discuss access to the internet, because it's imperative, it's important, and at the end of the day, it's internet access is your human right. And I will leave it at that. And thank you so much. I really had fun in this panel.
Thank you so much, Anju. I think that we're quite over time. I just want to check with Ida, if we have 30 seconds more, it'll be wonderful. I think Samiran has left the link in the chat, but if you could just finish up his USAG point, but if not, I think we're happy to sort of wrap up as well.
Please, Samiran, sir, please go ahead. We can wrap up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us another 30 seconds. So yes, I've left the link in the chat. It's usg.tech, and this talks about universal acceptance and what's going on across the world in this effort. There are local initiatives, particularly in India, which, if you wish to join or participate in, you'll get more information on that. And also, if you're from the technical community, there are documents that you can find over there on, standardizing some of these challenges and how to address them. So let me close by, again, thanking Udbhav for, moderating us in this conversation, and happy to see Anju, and it was a great conversation, and look forward to more contact with this cohort of youth, and any of the organizers of this group will be able to put you in touch with me. So please feel free to connect if you have follow-up questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Samiran. And with that, I think the panel's come to an end. Thank you so much for sticking with us, and a special thank you to the speakers for some great conversations. Ita, over to you for final remarks, if any.
Thank you, Udbhav. Thank you, Mr. Samiran. Thank you, Anju, very much for joining in today for the panel discussion titled Internet for All, Strengthening Literacy, Inclusion, Diversity. This actually happens to be the central and the main theme of this year's annual forum, which is Internet for All. And we're very glad that a lot of important challenges around Internet, such as accessibility, affordability, availability, in addition to all the initiatives that are there from each of the organizations like ICANN, the Mozilla Corporation, World Wide Web Foundation around making internet more inclusive and accessible were discussed. There were also topics and terms like censorship and internet shutdowns that were mentioned, discussed. Internet shutdown were extensively discussed. So I believe that there will be few of our participants who might be hearing the word for the first time. So what we have done is in the next session, we have first of all, I would like to request if the panel would like to stay for the next session, because it is a session that's organized by the organizing committee of BIG of 2021 and the fellowship alumni from our previous edition. And the topics we are going to discuss are internet shutdown and censorship. So it's going to be an activity-based session where we just want to understand what the perspectives are from the youth around these topics, because they are highly debated topics and every stakeholder can have a different opinion and a perspective. So based on their perspective, we want to navigate the discussion. So that's our idea. So thank you again, once again. Shraddha, over to you. Please proceed with the next session.
Yeah, Ahita, can you
Hello,
have the
I hope
slides?
you can see and hear me clearly. 1 second. I couldn't hear.